The acrid smell of smoke filled Maxim's nostrils as he crouched on the ridge, overlooking music, the small settlement through his makeshift scope. A piece of polished glass salvaged from his crashed ship, he watched the carnage unfold. Blue-called lizards, each the size of a large wolf, tore through the primitive huts of the green-skinned aliens. Their roars echoed across the valley, sending flocks of azure feathered birds scattering into the copper-colored sky. Maxim's hand instinctively tightened around the hilt of his knife, the last remnant of Earth he still possessed. 327 days, that's how long he'd survived on Zaya since his reconnaissance team was ambushed and slaughtered by those same predators. 327 days of solitude, of hunting and being hunted, of becoming one with the shadows of this alien world. The memories flashed unbidden, the screams of his teammates as they were torn apart, panicked orders from Captain Reeves as their formation broke, the sickening crunch as Lieutenant Dawson's spine snapped in powerful jaws. Maxim had escaped by pure luck, falling into a ravine the predators couldn't navigate. For 3 days he'd lain half-conscious at the bottom of that gorge, his body broken but somehow alive. When he finally dragged himself out, he was alone on a hostile planet with nothing but his combat knife and the clothes on his back. He should turn away now. That had been his code since the ambush. Avoid contact, stay hidden, survive. The aliens weren't his concern. Their wars, their losses, none of it mattered in the grand scheme of his survival. Yet he couldn't move. His eyes remained fixed on the settlement as flames consumed the simple structures. The lizards' SCR attack, the natives called them, dragged green bodies from the burning huts. Some were clearly dead, others struggled weakly, only to be silenced by powerful jaws. Maxim counted 11 screechers in total, more than he'd ever seen in one pack. They moved with terrifying coordination, communicating through a series of clicks and growls. This wasn't random violence. This was a calculated raid. As the last hut collapsed in flames, the screechers gathered their spoils. 3 younger aliens, still alive but subdued, were bound with vines and dragged away. The pack began to retreat into the dense forest, their blue scales glistening the fading light of Ka's setting sun. Maxim exhaled slowly. It was over. He could return to his hidden shelter in the caves to the north, but something caught his eye, movement among the smoldering ruins. He adjusted his scope, focusing on a small figure emerging from beneath a fallen section of wall. Child, a small green-skinned alien. Child, wobbling on unsteady legs as it moved toward a larger body lying motionless in the dirt. The child knelt beside the body, small hands reaching out to touch the still face. Not your problem, Maxim whispered to himself, lowering the scope. Not your fight. He turned to leave, but a memory flashed unbidden through his mind. Captain Reeves, his commanding officer, bleeding out in his arms after the ambush. Don't lose your humanity out here, Vyulov, she had gasped with her final breath. That's when they've truly won, Maxim cursed under his breath and looked back at the settlement. The child was still there, alone among the dead. The rational part of his brain screamed at him to walk away, but his feet were already moving down the ridge toward the ruined village. He approached cautiously, knife ready, eyes scanning for any screechers that might have lingered behind. Alien child didn't notice his approach until he was less than 10 m away, when it turned, Maxim saw large pupils' eyes. The color of amber, tears streaked the child's dusty green face. Stay back, Maxim said. Though he knew the alien couldn't understand Earth languages, he held up his empty hand in what he hoped was a universal gesture of peace. The child spoke a series of melodic clicks and trills that meant nothing to Maxim. But then, to his shock, it switched to broken, heavily accented English. You human from sky ships. Maxim froze. You speak my language? The child nodded. Slowly, little learned from others. Before it gestured to the destruction around them, Maxim approached, cautiously, keeping his knife visible, but lowered. What happened here? The child looked down at the body beside it. A female, Maxim guessed, with intricate patterns etched into her green skin. My mother, the child said simply. Dead now. Skreek, take sister. Other family too. Skreek. So the aliens had a name for the lizard predators. I'm sorry, Maxim said, the words feeling hollow and inadequate. The child looked up at him, those amber eyes seeming to bore into his soul. You helped find sister. Maxim felt his chest tighten. This was exactly the kind of entanglement he'd avoided for nearly a year. Getting involved meant exposure, danger, likely death. The Skuratak were savage predators, and he was just one man with a knife and a few improvised weapons. I can't, he said finally. Too dangerous. They'll kill us both. I'd die here anyway, the child replied with disarming simplicity. No food, no tribe. Skresh, come back. Maxim looked around at the destroyed settlement. The child was right. Alone, it wouldn't survive more than a few days. But taking it with him, hunting the Skreek pack, that was suicide. The child must have sensed his hesitation. It reached out, small green fingers touching his hand. Please, Era, need help. My name. Pulled his hand away. How old are you? Nema held up 7 fingers. 7. Cycle, 7 years old, alone on this brutal world. Maxim looked at the dead mother, then back to the child. Captain Reeves's final words echoed in his mind. Don't lose your humanity, he sighed, knowing he would probably regret this decision if he lived long enough to regret anything. I'll help you find shelter, food. That's all I can promise. Nema shook her head vigorously. Find Era, sister Skreek, take her. The Skreedak are too dangerous, Maxim insisted. A whole pack of them. You afraid? There was no accusation in Nema's voice, just a simple question. Maxim almost laughed. Yes, anyone with sense would be. Nema nodded solemnly. I afraid too, but Era more afraid. She pointed to the forest where the Skreech had disappeared. They eat soon, like harvest time. The implication turned Maxim's blood cold. He'd seen the Skreedak hunting smaller animals, but he'd assumed they'd taken the aliens as slaves or for some other purpose. If Nema was right, they didn't have much time. You know where they've gone? Their nest. Nema nodded. Mountain caves. Half day walk. She pointed to a jagged peak visible above the Tran to the east. Maxim weighed his options. His own shelter was in the opposite direction, where he had supplies, traps, weapons he'd crafted over months. But if the Skreekak were going to eat their captives, there was no time to go there. First, we need weapons, he said. Finally, Nema's face brightened slightly. She turned and ran to one of the less damaged huts, disappearing inside. When she emerged, she carried a small spear with a sharpened stone tip, a bow made from some flexible blue wood, and a quiver of arrows. Hunters' weapons, she explained, For defense. Ceremony, Maxim examined them. Craftsmanship was crude by Earth standards but functional. The bow was too small for him, clearly designed for the more slender build of the aliens. But the spear would be useful. He took it, testing its weight and balance. It'll do. Got anything to carry water? Nema disappeared again and returned with two small blads made from what looked like animal skin. Take from river, she said, pointing to a stream visible at the edge of the settlement. As Maxim filled the water containers, he watched Nema return to her mother's body. The child knelt beside it, singing softly in her native tongue. Then she removed a small pendant from around her mother's neck and placed it around her own Clear's throat. When she rose and turned to Maxim, her face had hardened with determination. I ready. Maxim nodded, silently acknowledging the child's strength. We follow their trail while they're still light. If we're lucky, we can catch up before they reach their nest. Nema fell in step beside him as they entered the forest, following the obvious trail left by the screech. Broken branches, disturbed earth, occasional splatters of green blood that Maxim tried to keep Nema from seeing. Your people? Maxim asked as they walked, partly to distract the child, partly out of genuine curiosity. What do you call yourselves? Vidian. Nema replied, it mean green ones in old tongue, and you've seen humans before. Skyhips. Nema nodded. 3 seasons past, big ships, many humans, some stay, learn language, trade, then screech come more often. Humans leave or die. That matched what Maxim knew. The initial survey teams had reported CIA as habitable but noted dangerous indigenous life forms. His reconnaissance team had been sent to assess the threat level more accurately. They'd found out the hard way just how dangerous the screech could be. Your sister Era, is she older or younger than you? Older, 10 cycles, smart, fast. Best student of elders. As they delved deeper into the forest, the light dimmed. Under the canopy of massive blue leaf trees, Maxim kept one hand on his knife, eyes constantly scanning for threats. They walked in silence for a while, Maxim's eyes constantly scanning the forest for threats. The blue-furred creatures that normally chittered in the trees were silent, likely scared away by the passing Skredak. That was both good and bad. Less chance of other predators, but it made it harder to move quietly when every sound they made seemed amplified in the unnatural silence. Low moans stopped them in their tracks. Maxim signaled for Nema to stay behind him as he crept forward, knife ready. Through a gap in the twisted trunks, he saw the tracks diverge. Some Skreek had separated from the main group. They split. Maxim whispered, hunting parties. Nema nodded fearfully. Always do. Some watch, some hunt, make trap. Maxim studied the tracks, his military training helping him interpret what had happened. The main group headed that way. With the captives, we need to be even more careful now, they continued. Eastward, the Skreek trail now joined by other tracks, snorts smaller, 3-toed prints that Maxim didn't recognize. Night stalkers, Nema explained. When he pointed them out, hunt with Skreek sometimes, small, fast, silent. Great, Maxi muttered, more problems. The terrain grew steeper as they approached the mountains. The forest thinned, giving way to rocky slopes dotted with twisted, stunted trees. The trail became harder to follow on the stony ground, but occasional scraps of fabric torn from the captives' clothing marked the way as the sun began to set, casting Long shadows across the landscape. Maxim spotted movement ahead. He pulled Nea behind a large boulder, peering cautiously around its edge. A skreek, smaller than the others but still formidable, was perched on a rock, outcropping about 50 m ahead. A century, Maxim realized, left behind to watch for. Pursued. We need to go around, he whispered to Nema. She shook her head. No time, path narrow ahead, only one way. Maxim studied the terrain and saw. She was right, the trail led through narrow defile between steep rock faces. A natural bottleneck the skreek were using to protect their rear. I'll have to take it out, he decided without making noise. He scanned the ground around them, picking up a fist-sized stone. It wasn't much of a weapon against a creature that size, but it might create the distraction he needed. Stay here, he told Nema. If something goes wrong, run back to the forest, hide in the trees. Before she could protest, Maxim began circling to approach the sentry from behind. He moved with practiced stealth, placing each foot carefully to avoid dislodging loose stones. Years of military training, enhanced by months of surviving as prey on this hostile world, had honed his skills to razor sharpness. The skreek remained focused on the path below, unaware of Maxim's approach. When he was within 10 m, he tossed the stone far to the creature's right. It clattered against the rocks, drawing the sentry's immediate attention. As the skreek turned to investigate, Maxim rushed forward, moving in the near silence that had kept him alive for nearly a year. The predator sensed him at the last moment, beginning to turn back, but too late. Maxim leaped onto its back, his left arm locking around the thick, scaly neck. With his right hand, he drove his knife into the soft spot beneath its jaw, the vulnerability Nema had described. The blade sank deep, releasing a gush of hot, dark blood. Skreek thrashed wildly, nearly throwing Maxim off. Its claws rad backward, catching his thigh and tearing through the fabric of his pants into flesh. Maxim gritted his teeth against the pain, twisting the knife deeper, searching for the vital artery he knew must be there. With a final violent spasm, the skreek collapsed, its massive body going limp beneath him. Maxim rolled clear, breathing hard, his leg throbbing where the claws had caught him. He examined the wound. 3 parallel gashes, bleeding freely, but not deep enough to hit anything vital. Nema appeared at his side, her eyes wide, as she looked from the dead skreek to Maxim. You kill silent, she said, a note of awe in her voice, like ghost. Not silent enough, Maxim replied, tearing a strip from the bottom of his shirt to bind his leg. If this one was watching for followers, they might check on it. If it doesn't return, he cleaned his knife on the skreek's hide and reshaved it. We need to move faster now. Nema helped him bind the wound, her small fingers surprisingly deft. When it was secured, they continued through the narrow pass, Maxim limping slightly, but forcing himself to maintain a steady pace. Beyond the defile, the path wound upward along the mountainside, eventually reaching a plateau dotted with cave entrances. Maxim pulled Nema behind a cluster of rocks, studying the area through his makeshift scope. Which cave? He whispered. Nema pointed to the largest opening where what looked like crude totems made from bones had been erected. Main nest where prison kept. Maxim counted at least 6 skreek moving around the cave entrance with more likely inside. A frontal assault was suicide. Are there other ways in? Back entrances? Nema considered this. Many caves and mountain all connected. Maybe find another way, that was their best chance. They circled wide around the plateau, keeping to the shadows as the last light faded from the sky. Zia's moon rose, a pale copper disk that cast just enough light to see by. They'd nearly completed their circuit of the mountain when Nema tugged urgently at Maximum's sleeve, pointing to a narrow fissure in the rock face, barely visible in the darkness. Water path, she whispered. Leads inside mountain. Maxim eyed the opening dubiously. You sure it connects to their nest? Not sure, Nema admitted, but all caves join deep inside. It was a risk, but their options were limited. If the Skredak were planning to eat their captives, time was running out. I'll go first, Maxim decided. Stay close behind me. He squeezed into the fissure, finding it narrower than it had appeared. The rough stone scraped against his shoulders as he inched forward, one hand always on his knife. Water trickled beneath his feet, making the footing treacherous. After several minutes of claustrophobic crawling, the passage widened enough for Maxim to stand upright. The sound of running water grew louder, echoing off unseen walls. Under river, Nema whispered, her voice barely audible over the water. Flows through mountain. They followed the sound, moving cautiously in near total darkness. Occasionally, patches of luminescent fungi provided just enough light to avoid stumbling into the water or walking into walls. The air grew warmer and more humid the deeper they went, carrying strange musky scents. The passage eventually opened into a larger chamber where the underground river formed a pool before continuing deeper into the mountain. More of the glowing fungi covered the walls and ceiling, here casting an eerie blue light over everything. Rest here, Maxim said, his injured leg throbbing painfully. Just for a minute they drank from the pool, the water cool and surprisingly sweet. Maxim checked his leg wound, finding the bleeding had slowed but not stopped entirely. He tightened the makeshift bandage. A splash from the far side of the pool made them both freeze. Maxim peered through the dim blue light, trying to identify the source of the disturbance. A ripple moved across the water surface, heading directly toward them. Whatever it was big. Back, Maxim hissed, pulling Nemo away from the water's edge. Now they retreated toward the passage they had entered through. But before they could reach it, something erupted from the pool. Serpentine creature with multiple fins running along its length. Its head was narrow and eyeless, with a circular mouth ringed with needle-like teeth. River Hunter, Nema cried in terror. The creature lunged toward them with shocking speed, its body slithering across the wet stone. Maxim pushed Nema behind him and raised his spear, bracing for impact. The river hunter crashed into him with enough force to drive the air from his lungs. The spear's stone tip penetrated its pale, slick hide, but didn't stop its momentum. Maxim was thrown backward, losing his grip on the weapon as he slammed into the chamber wall. Dazed, he saw the creature writhing, the spear embedded in its flesh but apparently not hitting anything vital. It turned toward him, sensing his movement despite its lack of eyes. Nema's voice rang out, a high, trilling sound that echoed off the chamber walls. The river hunter paused, its head swiving toward the new sound. Maxim seized the opportunity, drawing his knife and lunging forward. He drove the blade into what he hoped was a vulnerable spot, the underside of its jaw where it connected to the body. Creature convulsed violently, nearly wrenching the knife from Maxim's grip. He held on, twisting the blade deeper. With a final spasm, the river hunter collapsed, its long body twitching as life left it. Maxim retrieved his knife, wiping the clear, viscous blood on his pants. "What was that sound you made?" he asked Nema. "Confusion call," she explained, still trembling from the encounter. Elders teach makes river hunters lose direction sense. Quick thinking, Maxim acknowledged, retrieving his spear from the creature's body. "Let's keep moving before more show up." They left the chamber, following a different passage that sloped gradually upward. The sound of water faded behind them, replaced by a new sound, distant and muffled but unmistakable. The clicking communication of Skriak. "We're getting close," Maxim whispered. The passage branched multiple times, but each time Nema seemed to know which way to choose, her head tilted as if listening to something Maxim couldn't hear. "How do you know which way?" he asked after the third such junction. "Feel air," she replied. "Smell Skri." Tack. Maxim tried to detect what she was sensing, but his human senses weren't as attuned to the subtle cues she was following. He had to trust her instincts. The clicking grew louder as they ascended. Eventually the passage opened into a small chamber with multiple exits, one larger than they others had rudimentary steps carved into the stone leading upward. "That's it," Maxim guessed. "That must lead to their nest." Nema nodded, her face a mask of fear and determination. "Smell blood, Vidian blood." Maxim felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. "Stay behind me," he ordered, starting up the crude steps. They climbed cautiously, the sounds of the Skreek growing ever louder. A faint light became visible above them, not the blue glow of the fungi, but a warmer flickering light. Fire. The steps ended at a narrow opening partially concealed by a hanging curtain of bones threaded on sinew. Maxim peered carefully through a gap, his breath catching at what he saw. A vast cavern stretched before them, illuminated by several fire pits. Dozens of Skreek moved about the space, some carrying bones or meat, others grooming each other or simply resting on raised platforms made of stone and packed earth. But it was the center of the cavern that drew Maxim's eye. 3 crude cages hung from the ceiling, suspended by thick vines. Inside each was a Vidian, 2 adults and 1 child. The child, a girl slightly older than Nema, was in the cage closest to their hiding place. "Era," Nema breathed, pressing forward to see through the gap. Maxim held her back. "There are too many," he whispered. "At least 20, maybe more." Nema's eyes filled with tears. But Era. Maxim studied the cavern layout, his military training kicking in as he assessed threats and opportunities. The Skreedak were clustered mostly in groups, with only a few individuals moving. Between them, the cages were suspended over one of the fire pits, presumably to cook the captives when the time came. Larger Skreedak, its blue scales marked with distinctive scarring across its snout, seemed to be directing the others. The leader, Maxim guessed, if they could create enough chaos, rescue might be possible, but they needed a diversion. His gaze fell on the far side of the cavern where several large containers, possibly made from hollow tree trunks, were positioned. Some kind of liquid sloshed inside them. When Skriak approached to dip crude ladles, "What are those?" he asked Nema, pointing discreetly. "Fire water," she replied. Skriak, "Drink. Make more." Aggressive, more not thinking right. Alcohol or something similar, Malcolm realized, in position near one of the fire pits, an idea began to form. Dangerous, probably it's suicidal, but possibly their only chance. I need something to burn, he told Nema. Something that will catch fire quickly and burn hot. Nema thought for a moment, then reached into a small pouch at her waist. She pulled out several dried leaves. Zucca leaf, she explained, burns fast, bright, hunters use for signals. Perfect, Maxim said. Here's what we'll do. He outlined his plan. They would split up using smaller connecting passages Nema was confident existed. Nema would create a distraction at the far end of the cavern while Maxim used the chaos to free Era and the other prisoners. Be careful, he told her. If anything goes wrong, run. Don't wait for me. Nema clutched her mother's pendant. I not leave without sister. Without you. Before Maxim could argue, she slipped away into the shadows, leaving him alone with his doubts and a desperate plan. He counted slowly to 300, giving Nema time to get into position. Then he readied himself, knife in one hand, spear in the other. Everything depended on timing now. Just as he reached 300, a brilliant flash of light erupted on the far side of the cavern, followed by a thick plume of acrid smoke. The effect on the screen was immediate and dramatic. They recoiled from the light, several clawing at their eyes and emitting high-pitched shrieks of pain, but that was just the beginning. Moments later, one of the containers of firewater exploded into flames, likely ignited by the burning Zucca leaves Nema had thrown. The fire spread rapidly to the others, creating a wall of flame that cut off that section of the cavern. The Skriek descended into panic, some rushing toward the flames while others fled in all directions. In the confusion, Maxim darted from his hiding place, sprinting toward the suspended cages. The scarred leader was one of the few who maintained its composure, roaring commands that temporarily cut through the chaos. It spotted Maxim and charged, its massive body moving with surprising speed. Maxim had anticipated this. He dropped to one knee, bracing the butt of his spear against the stone floor and angling the point upward. The charging Skriek, focused on Maxim's upper body, ran directly onto the spear point. The stone tip penetrated the soft underside of its arm, driving deep into its brain. The creature's momentum carried it forward, snapping the spear shaft but driving the point even deeper. It collapsed in a heap just short of Maxim's position, its massive tail thrashing in death spasms. Maxim didn't waste time celebrating. He rushed to the nearest cage, Era's, and began slashing at the vine bindings with his knife. The young Vidian girl stared at him with the same amber eyes as her sister, wide with fear and confusion. I'm here to help, Maxim said, sawing through the tough vines. Your sister sent me. At the mention of Nema, understanding flashed across Era's face. She pointed urgently to her right, where one of the Skriek had recovered enough to charge toward them. Maxim spun knife ready, but before the creature reached them, a small green figure leaped onto its back. Nema, wielding a burning brand from one of the fire pits, drove the flaming end directly into the Skriek's eye. The predator shrieked in agony, bucking wildly to dislodge her. Nema held on with grim determination, continuing to stab at its sensitive eyes. With her makeshift weapon, Maxim returned to cutting Era free, his blade finally severing the last vine. The cave collapsed, depositing Era Unceremoniously on the ground, he helped her up quickly. The others, she said in the same broken English as Nema, pointing to the remaining cages. Maxim nodded, already moving toward the next captive, an adult male with elaborate patterns etched into his green skin. Vidian watched him with stoic calm as Maxim began cutting through the binding vines. Across the cavern, Nema had been thrown from the blinded Skriek's back. She rolled away as it snapped blindly at where she had landed, its movements erratic and uncoordinated. "Run," Maxim shouted to her. "Get Era and run." Nema ignored him, darting between the creature's legs and retrieving her drop torch with remarkable courage. For one so young, she thrust it at the Skriek's underbelly, igniting the oily secretions that covered its scales. Snorts, the creature howled as flames raced across its body. It thrashed wildly, colliding with two other Skriek that had been approaching. All three tumbled into one of the fire pits, their shrieks echoing through the cavern. By now Maxim had freed the adult male. As the Vidian dropped to the ground, he immediately took the knife from Maxim's hand and rushed to the last cage, cutting his fellow captive free with desperate speed. Morse Gredak were regrouping, the initial shock of the explosion wearing off. At least 8 formed a loose circle around the humans, and Vidians, wary but clearly preparing to attack. "We need a way out," Maxim shouted to the adult Vidians, retrieving his knife from the male. The female Vidian, now freed from her cage, pointed to a narrow passage partially hidden behind one of the bone totems. "That way to water caves." Maxim nodded. "Boo. Take the children. I'll hold them off." The male Vidian hesitated, clearly reluctant to leave Maxim behind. He spoke rapidly to the female, who responded with equal urgency. Then he turned to Maxim. "Together," he said in halting English. "Fight together." Before Maxim could argue, the Skreek attacked from all sides. He ducked under the first lunge, slashing at its exposed throat as it passed. The Vidian male proved to be a capable fighter despite his captivity, using a bone from the totem as a club to smash another Skreek's snout with bone-crushing force. Nema and Era had reunited in the chaos, the sisters clinging to each other as the female adult tried to pull them toward the escape route, but two Skreek blocked their path, advancing with murderous intent. Maxim saw their predicament and charged, ignoring the burning pain in his injured leg. He tackled one Skreek from behind, the momentum carrying them both into the second. All three crashed to the ground in a tangle of limbs and thrashing tails. Claws ran across Maxim's back, tearing through his shirt and into flesh. Teeth snapped inches from his face as he wrestled with creatures twice as strength. He managed to drive his knife into one's eye, but the other clamped its jaws around his forearm, the pressure threatening to crush bone. Blur of motion, and suddenly the jaws released. The Vidian male stood over him, the now bloodied bone club raised for another strike. The Skreek lay stunned, its skull partially caved in. "Go," the Vidian urged, helping Maxim to his feet. Now they ran for the escape passage, Maxim's arm hanging limp and useless at his side. Behind them, Morsi Tech poured into the main cavern from other entrances, drawn by the commotion. The passage was narrow and winding, barely large enough for the adults to navigate. They moved as quickly as they could, the sounds of pursuit growing louder behind them. "Where does this lead?" Maxim gasped, each breath sending Spikes of pain through his lacerated back. River caves, the female Vidian replied, then outside if we reach water we safe for time. They emerged into the same chamber where Maxim and Nema had encountered the river hunter. Its carcass still lay by the pool, already being consumed by small crab-like scavengers. Crosswater, the male Vidian directed, pointing to the far side of the pool. Skresh, not like deep water. That was a complication Maxim hadn't anticipated. I can't swim with this arm, he admitted. The Vidian male didn't hesitate. He stripped off his simple garment and tied it around Maxim's chest, creating a crude harness. I pull, he explained. You float. There was no time to argue. The sounds of pursuit were growing louder, echoing down the passage they just traversed. They waded into the pool, the water shockingly cold after the heat of the cavern above. Vidian proved to be a strong swimmer, pulling Maxim across with powerful strokes while the female swam alongside. They had almost reached the far side when the first Skrek burst into the chamber. It hesitated at the water's edge, pacing back and forth and emitting frustrated shrieks. Others joined it, their combined cries creating a deafening cacophony that reverberated through the chamber. One, braver or more desperate than the others, entered the water. It swam awkwardly but with determination, gaining on them rapidly. Hurry, Nema cried, already scrambling onto the rocks of the far shore. Vidian male gave a final powerful pull, propelling Maxim to where Era and the female adult waited to drag him from the water. The male turned back, treading water as he faced the approaching Screech. No, Maxim shouted, realizing the Vidian's intention. Don't, but it was too late. The male Vidian dove beneath the surface, directly under the swimming Skredek. What happened next was hidden by the dark water, but the Skreek suddenly thrashed violently, then went still, floating lifelessly on the surface. The Vidian did not resurface. Tarek, the female cried, starting back toward the water. Maxim grabbed her arm with his good hand. He's gone, he said, his voice rough with emotion. He sacrificed himself so we could escape. The female's amber eyes filled with tears, but she nodded in grim understanding. She spoke softly to the girls in their native language, then turned back to Maxim. This way, she said, pointing to a passage leading away from the pool, not far to outside now. They moved as quickly as Maxim's injuries would allow, the girls helping support him when the pain threatened to overwhelm him. The passage sloped upward, the air growing fresher as they ascended. Finally, after what felt like hours of desperate flight, they emerged from a small opening on the far side of the mountain range. The bright light of dawn made them squint after so long in the dim caves. Maxim collapsed against a boulder, his strength finally giving out. The female Vidian immediately began examining his wounds, her touch gentle but sure. Bad, she pronounced after inspecting his savaged arm and back. Need medicine. Where? Mickey masked through gritted teeth, the adrenaline fading and the full extent of his injuries making themselves known. Southern's tribe, she replied. 1 day walk, have healers. Nema and Era approached, the sisters still clinging to each other. Despite their ordeal, they both showed remarkable resilience. You save us, Era said simply. Thank you. Maxim looked at the children, then at the female Vidian. They had all lost someone. Nema and Era, their mother, the female, her mate Track, yet they Endured, we saved each other, he replied. The female finished bandaging his wounds with strips torn from her garment, using some kind of sap from a nearby plant to seal the deeper cuts. Rest now, she said. When stronger we walk to Southern Tribe. Maxim nodded, exhaustion overwhelming him. As he drifted into unconsciousness, he felt small hands take his, Nema on one side, Era on the other. We family now, he heard Nema say, her voice seeming to come from very far away. When Maxim awoke, the sun was high in the copper sky. His wounds had been rebandaged, and a crude splint supported his injured arm. The female Vidian, who had introduced herself as LRA, had constructed a shelter of branches and leaves to protect him from the direct sunlight. How long was I out? He asked, his throat dry and raw. Half day, Lero replied, offering him water from one of the skin bladders. Fever came then went. Strong blood, you Maxim drank gratefully. The Skreek no sign, she assured him, but we should move soon. Not safe here. Nema and Era had been gathering some kind of blueberries, which they now offered to Maxim. The fruit was tart but refreshing, and he felt some of his strength returning as he ate. Can you walk? El asked when he had finished. Maxim tested his legs, wincing at the pain from various cuts and bruises, but finding everything functional. I'll manage it, he said. They set off toward the south, Lara leading the way with sure steps despite the rough terrain. The sisters walked on, and either side of Maxim, occasionally steadying him when he stumbled. Your mate, Maxim said to LRA after they had been walking for some time. Tarek, he was very brave. Elra's face showed a complex mixture of grief and pride. He, warrior protector, now spirit watches over us. They traveled through the day, resting frequently for Maxim's sake. Landscape gradually changed from rocky mountainsides to rolling hills covered in strange fern-like vegetation. Small creatures with multiple legs scuttled away at their approach. As the sun began to set, they crested a hill and saw lights in the valley below, fires burning within a palisade of sharpened stakes. The Southern Tribes village. Almost there, LRA said, relief evident in her voice. But their ordeal wasn't over. As they started down the hillside, a sound that had haunted Maxim's nightmares for nearly a year was echoed across the valley. The hunting shriek of a Skreek. They followed, Era whispered, fear returning to her amber eyes. Maxim scanned the darkening landscape, finally spotting movement at the base of the hill. 3 Skreeks moving with purpose toward their position. Among them was a massive individual with part of a spear shaft still embedded in its jaw. The leader Maxim thought he had killed. Run for the village, he ordered, drawing his knife with his good hand. I'll hold them off. No, Nema cried, clinging to his leg. Come with us, there's no time, Maxim insisted. Go now, LRA. Understood. She grabbed both girls, ignoring their protests, and began half dragging them toward the village. They might make it if the Skreek were delayed long enough. Maxim positioned himself on the slope, using the higher ground to his advantage. His body screamed with pain, but he pushed it aside, focusing on the approaching predators. The Skreed tack spread out, attempting to flank him. The leader remained in the center, its movement slower than the others, likely still recovering from its near-fatal injury. That would be his target. Maxim waited until they were within 20 m, then charged directly at the leader. The Sudden aggressive move seemed to surprise the Screech, giving him a momentary advantage. He dodged the first flanker's lunge, slashing at its eye as he passed. The second caught him with a glancing blow from its tail, sending him stumbling but not falling. He recovered and continued his charge toward the leader. The massive Screech rose to its full height, nearly twice Maxim's size, and let out a deafening roar. Maxim didn't slow. He feinted to the left, then dived right as the creature snapped at where he had appeared to be going. Rolling beneath its guard, he came up beside the partially embedded spear shaft with all his remaining strength. He grabbed it with his good hand and wrenched it sideways, tearing open the wound he had inflicted in the cavern. The Skreek leader howled in agony, black blood gushing from the reopened wound. It thrashed wildly, one massive paw catching Maxim across the chest and sending him flying. He landed hard, the impact driving what little air remained from his lungs through blurred vision. He saw the leader collapse, blood pumping from its ruined throat. The other two Skreeks circled uncertainly, clearly dependent on their alpha for direction. Maxim struggled to his feet, knife still somehow clutched in his hand. He faced the remaining Screech, knowing he had no strength left for another fight, but determined to buy as much time as possible for LRA and the girls. A horn blasted through the twilight, a deep resonant sound that echoed across the valley. The Skreek froze, head swiveling toward the source. Maxim risked a glance and saw dozens of Vidians emerging from the village bearing spears and bows. LRA must have reached them and raised the alarm. The Skreek outnumbered and without their leader chose survival. They retreated, dragging the leader's massive corpse with them in what Maxim recognized as a surprisingly sophisticated desire not to leave their dead behind. He sank to his knees, knife falling from nerveless fingers. The world spun around him, darkness encroaching at the edges of his vision. The last thing he saw before consciousness fled was Nema running toward him, her amber eyes wide with concern, her small voice calling his name. Maxim drifted in and out of consciousness for what might have been days. Fragments of sensation and sound reached him through the haze of fever. Cool hands on his brow, the bitter taste of medicine, Nema's voice singing softly beside him. When he finally awoke fully, he found himself in a circular hut with walls of woven branches sealed with clay. Sunlight filtered through a smoke hole in the center of the domed roof, illuminating simple furnishings, a low table, sleeping pallets, containers of various sizes. He was alone, but not for long. The entrance flap moved aside and Nema burst in, her face lighting up when she saw him awake. Maxim, she cried, rushing to his side. You better now. I think so, he replied, his voice rough from disuse. He tried to sit up and found it easier than expected. His wounds had been expertly treated, covered with some kind of green paste that numbed the pain. Nema helped him to a sitting position, then offered him a cup of something that smelled strongly. Herbal drink, medicine makes strong. Maxim sipped cautiously, finding in the taste not as unpleasant as the smell had suggested. How long was I out? 4 days. Nema replied. Healers say you almost join spirits. The entrance flap moved again. An era entered, followed by LRA and an elderly Vidian male whose skin was covered in the most elaborate patterns Maxim had yet seen. The human warrior awakes, the elder said in perfect unaccented English, we were concerned you might not return to us. Maxim stared in surprise. You speak my language. The elder smiled. I was liaison to your people when they first came to Shia. Before the troubles began, my name is Sovereign. LRA stepped forward. Sovereign is chief of Southern Tribe. He give us shelter, protection. Thank you, Maxim said sincerely, for everything. Sovereign waved a dismissive hand. It is we who should thank you. You saved these three at great risk too. Yourself, and you killed a great one, Skreedeg Alpha. Few can claim such a feat. Maxim shook his head. I nearly died trying. And we lost Tarek in the escape. LRA's face showed momentary grief, but she stood straight. Tarek die as warrior protecting family, greatest honor. Saver nodded solemnly. His spirit watches over us all now. He turned back to Maxim. When you are recovered, we would hear your full story, how you came to be alone on Zia, and how you survived so long. It's not a pleasant tale, Maxim warned. Few tales are in these times. Sovereign replied with a sad smile. But they must be told nonetheless. The elder and LRA departed, leaving Maxim with the two sisters. Era approached cautiously, her amber eyes studying him with intelligent curiosity. Thank you, she said simply, for saving me, for helping Nema. Maxim felt something unlock in his chest, a warmth he had thought long extinguished by the brutal realities of survival on Zia. You're welcome, he replied. You were very brave, both of you. Nema beamed at the praise. We stay together now, she declared. Southern Tribe accept us, accept you. Is that so? Maxim asked, amused by her certainty. Era nodded. Sovereigns say you welcome here, become part of tribe if you wish. Maxim considered this. For nearly a year he had existed as a ghost, avoiding contact, focused solely on survival. The thought of rejoining a community, even an alien one, was both appealing and terrifying. I'll think about it, he promised. The sisters exchanged a look that suggested they considered the matter already decided. Perhaps they were right. After what they had endured together, could he really walk away? Over the following days, as his strength returned, Maxim learned more about the Southern Tribe. They were more numerous than Nema and Era's northern settlement had been, with better defenses and organized hunting parties that kept the Skreek at bay. Saver explained that the Vidians had once been more technologically advanced, but had deliberately abandoned many technologies after a devastating civil war centuries earlier. They now lived in harmony with CIA's ecosystem, taking only what they needed and respecting the world's natural balance. Your people, when they first came, seemed to understand this philosophy, Sovereign told Maxim as they walked through the village. But then others arrived, those who saw Zia only for its resources, its potential wealth. The military expedition, Maxim said, understanding dawning. My team, sir, nodded. They disturbed areas the Skreek consider sacred hunting grounds they had claimed for generations. The result was unfortunate. That's one way to put it, Maxim said grimly, remembering his teammate's screams. The Skreek are not evil, Saver continued. They are predators following their nature, but they are also intelligent with their own society, their own rules. When those rules are broken, they respond with violence. They eat sentient beings, Maxim pointed out, as do we, Saver countered. The blue-furred grazing animals you've seen in the forests, they are as intelligent as your Earth. Dolphins, yet we hunt them for food, all. Life on the ice in a complex web of predator and prey. Maxim wasn't entirely convinced, but he respected the Ellers's perspective. The Vidians had survived on this world far longer than he had. One evening, as Maxim sat outside his assigned hut, watching Ka's copper moon rise, Nema and Era joined him. They had been attending lessons with the Tribs teachers, learning skills they would need as adults. Despite their rafar and trauma, they were adapting remarkably well. We have questioned, Nema said, settling beside him. What is it? Maxim asked. You stay become Vidian. Maxim smiled at the directness of the question. I don't think I can become Vidian. Wrong skin color. Era shook her head. Not skin, heart, spirit. Sovereigns say anyone can be Vidian in spirit. Maxim looked at the sisters, seeing the hope in their amber eyes. They had adopted him as surely as he had adopted them during their desperate flight from the Skredak. Before he could answer, a commotion arose at the village's main gate. Hunters returning from an expedition were calling for Sovereign, their voices urgent. Maxim rose, instinctively checking the knife at his belt. Stay here, he told the girls, moving toward the gathering crowd. Sover was already there, listening intently to the hunters' report. When he saw Maxim approach, he beckoned him forward. They found something, the elder said, his expression grave. Something you should see. The hunting party led them to a clearing about an hour's walk from the village. As they approached, Maxim saw it, a ship, not the massive colony vessels that had brought the first human settlers, but a smaller craft, a rescue shuttle. It landed 3 days ago, the hunt leader explained. We've been watching, but no one has emerged. Maxim approached the craft cautiously. It bore Earth Alliance markings, its hull scorched from atmospheric entry, but otherwise intact. The entry ramp was deployed, but the interior was dark. Wait here, he told the Vidians, drawing his knife. He ascended the ramp slowly, senses alert for any threat. The shuttle's interior was silent and still. Emergency lighting cast a red glow over empty crew seats and secured equipment. No bodies, no signs of struggle. A soft beeping drew his attention to the communications console. A message was playing on a loop. This is an automated Earth Alliance rescue beacon. If you are receiving this message, please respond with your identification and status. Rescue teams are en route to Gia following the reception of an emergency signal. Estimated arrival 7 standard days. Maxim stared at the console, emotions warring within him. After nearly a year believing himself abandoned, help was finally coming. He could go home. He returned to the waiting Vidians and explained the situation. Saver listened thoughtfully, then spoke. So, you will leave us when your people arrive? It wasn't a question, but Maxim felt compelled to answer anyway. I don't know, he admitted. A week ago I would have said yes without hesitation. But now his gaze drifted to where Nema and Era waited back at the village, undoubtedly bursting with curiosity about the commotion. You have time to decide, Sabron said gently. 7 days. You said much can become clear in 7 days. They returned to the village, the hunters remaining behind to watch the shuttle. Maxim found himself unable to share the news with Nema and Era immediately. Instead, he spent the night on the village's defensive wall, staring at the stars and thinking. Earth represented safety, civilization, everything he had longed for during his months of desperate survival. But it also meant leaving behind the strain, new bonds he had formed here with the Vidian people, and especially with the two orphan sisters who now looked to him for protection and guidance. The next morning he found Nema practicing with her small bow at the edge of the village. Her accuracy had improved dramatically under the tutelage of the Trib's hunters. "You're getting good," he observed as she hit the center of her target for the third time in a row. She beamed at the praise. "Huntmaster say, have gift like mother." Her expression faltered briefly at the mention of her lost parent. "She would be proud of you," Maxim said softly. "Both of you." Nema lowered her bow, suddenly serious. "Hunters talk, say Earth people coming back. You go with them." News traveled fast in the small community. Maxim sighed, kneeling to meet her at eye level. "I don't know yet," he answered. "Honestly, it's complicated." "Not complicated," Nema disagreed. "Stay or go." "Simple. Nothing about leaving is simple." Maxim tried to explain. "Earth is my home, this home now," Nema insisted. "We family." The simple declaration hit Maxim with unexpected force. She was right in her childlike wisdom. They had become a family forged in the crucible of survival and mutual protection. Before he could respond, shouts erupted from the village center. Not alarm, but excitement. Maximum and Nema hurried to investigate and found the hunters who had been watching the shuttle returning with company. 3 humans in Earth Alliance uniform stood beside Savor, looking bewildered but unharmed. 2 men and a woman, all bearing the insignia of a rescue team. Snorts. The woman stepped forward as Maxim approached. "Lieutenant Volkov?" she asked, disbelief evident in her voice. "Maxim Volkov." Maxim nodded, suddenly conscious of his appearance, dressed in a mixture of tattered uniform and Vidian garments scarred from countless clothes calls, his once regulation haircut grown wild. "Captain Alexa Rivera," she introduced herself. "Earth Alliance Rescue Division. We picked up your emergency beacon's automated response and decided to investigate ahead of the main rescue force." She shook her head in amazement. "Everyone thought you were dead. Your whole team was reported lost." "They were," Maxim confirmed grimly. "I'm the only survivor." Captain Rivera's expression grew professional again. "We need a full debriefing, Lieutenant, and we should get you medical attention as soon as possible. Our shuttle has basic facilities." Nema had been watching the exchange with growing alarm. She moved closer to Maxim, taking his hand in a gesture that was both possessive and fearful. "Who this?" Rivera asked, noticing the child for the first time. "This is Nema," Maxim replied, "and her sister Era is around here somewhere. They saved my life." He squeezed Nema's hand reassuringly. Rivera looked confused. "You've gone native, lived with the aliens, the Vidians," Maxim corrected, a note of defensiveness entering his voice. "And only recently I survived alone for most of the past year." One of the male officers whistled softly. "Nearly a year alone on this death trap of a planet. That's impressive, Lieutenant. We should return to the shuttle," Rivera said clearly, anxious to leave the alien village. "The main rescue vessel will be here in a week. We need to prepare for extraction." Maximum felt Nema's grip tighten on his hand. "I need some time," he told Rivera. "A few days to sort things out." Rivera Frowned Lieutenant with all due respect. You've been through a traumatic experience. You're not thinking clearly. Let us get you back to the shuttle. Proper medical care. My wounds have been treated. Maxim interrupted the Vidian. Healers are quite skilled, and I am thinking clearly, Captain. This is not a decision I can make hastily. Rivera looked like she wanted to argue further, but one of her companions placed a restraining hand on her arm. Give him some space, Alexa, the man said quietly. He's been through hell. After a moment, Rivera nodded. 3 days. Lieutenant, then we need your decision. The main rescue vessel won't wait. Maxim nodded. I understand. The rescue team departed, escorted by Vidian hunters or so. As they disappeared through the village gate, Era joined Maxim and Nema, her expression anxious. You leave with Sky People? She asked directly. Maxim sighed. I don't know yet. I have 3 days to decide. The sisters exchanged a look, some unspoken communication passing between them. Then Era spoke again, her voice more formal than Maxim had ever heard it. We show you something tomorrow at Lightcom. Important place. What place? Maxim asked, curious. Sacred place, Nema explained, where Vidians choose path. Maxim agreed, touched by their desire to share something so significant with him. That night he slept poorly, his dreams a confused jumble of Earth memories and Sheen experiences. At dawn, the sisters were waiting outside his hut, dressed in ceremonial garments LRA had helped them prepare. They led him from the village, following a path that wound through dense forest and eventually began to climb into the foothills of a mountain range Maxim hadn't explored. After several hours of hiking, they reached their destination, a high plateau overlooking much of the surrounding territory. At its center stood a circle of stone pillars, each carved with symbols Maxim couldn't decipher. Vision circle, Era explained, where young Vidians come to find life path. And you want me to what? Have a vision? Maxim asked, skeptical but trying not to show it. Nema shook her head. No vision, just see. She gestured to the spectacular view. From this vantage point, Maxim could see for miles in every direction the southern Trib's village, the mountain where they had rescued Era, the distant northern territories where Nemur and Era's original settlement had been, and beyond that, barely visible on the horizon, the massive impact crater where the first human colony ships had landed years earlier. 2 worlds, Ara said, pointing first to the human settlement, then to the Vidian village. 2 paths but 1 heart. She placed her hand on Maxim's chest. The simple gesture moved him more than any elaborate ceremony could have. These children who had lost everything were offering him a choice, but also showing him that either choice could be made. With honor, they returned to the village. Under Zia's copper moon, the sisters singing softly as they walked. Savor was waiting for them at the gate, as if he had known exactly when they would return. You have visited the vision circle, he observed, noting the ceremonial garments the girls wore. Maxim nodded. They wanted me to see both paths clearly. And do you? The elder asked. Yes, Maxim replied. I believe I do, as they set off toward the distant horizon, following the adult Vidians toward the promise of safety and community. Maxim reflected on the strange twist of fate that had brought him to this moment. He had come to Ya as a soldier, become a survivor, and now found himself something else entirely. A protector, a friend, perhaps. even a surrogate father to two alien children who had lost everything. The path ahead would not be easy. The Skriak would likely hunt them, seeking revenge for their slain leader. Resources would be scarce, dangers abundant, but for the first time since the ambush that had left him stranded on this alien world, Maxim felt something. Like hope, he glanced down at Nima, walking determinedly beside him despite her exhaustion, and at Era, who moved with the natural grace of her people, Bo, ready to defend their small group. If needed, Captain Reeves would have been proud, he thought. He hadn't lost his humanity after all. Perhaps in finding these children, in choosing to help rather than hide, he had finally rediscovered it. The copper sun of Gia climbed higher in the alien sky, casting long shadows across the rugged landscape. Somewhere in the distance, a flock of azure birds took flight, their calls echoing across the valley. Dangerous and beautiful, brutal yet filled with wonder, this world that had nearly broken him now offered a new beginning.